Ever get that feeling like you really want to dive deep into something big? Maybe something that could like totally change how you see the world,
Yeah.
but you don't exactly have like weeks and weeks to just read through a ton of research and stuff.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing for you today, basically.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a deep dive into a discovery.
Okay.
And it's a pretty major one. It's right in the heart of Egypt.
Okay.
Now, forget everything you think you know about the pyramids.
Okay.
For a second, at least, because we're not talking about what's inside them.
Okay.
We're going underneath. We're talking about what lies beneath one of them.
Wow.
Specifically, the Khafre pyramid at Giza.
Oh, wow.
That's the one right next to the Great Pyramid.
Right.
And it might just be holding secrets that we never even imagined.
Really?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
So basically what we're aiming to do in this deep dive is explore these findings,
Okay.
these structures that seem to go way beyond like the traditional footprint of the pyramids.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at what these discoveries tell us, or at least what questions they raise.
Right.
Like who could have actually built these things?
Yeah.
And what kind of technology did they have to pull it off?
Right.
We've gone through a whole bunch of material for this, like scientific analysis with all this fancy radar technology, plus some really old myths and legends.
Oh, wow.
So it's a good mix.
Sounds like it.
And the coolest part, honestly the most fascinating part, is how they even found these structures.
Oh, no.
Forget those pictures you see of archaeologists carefully brushing away sand with a little brush.
Right.
This is high-tech stuff. We're talking about synthetic aperture radar. SAR.
SAR.
Yeah. Basically, it's a system that uses satellites.
Okay.
They send radar waves down to Earth, and then they study how those waves bounce back
Oh, I see.
from different angles.
Yeah.
This way, scientists can create a 3D map.
A map.
Yeah, of what's going on beneath the surface.
Wow.
And that's how they found these chambers and formations
So-
that just don't fit the whole pyramids are just tombs idea.
Okay, so let's start with the hard evidence. What does the science actually say?
Okay, so there's this study from MDPI.
MDPI.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, SAR is all about seeing beneath the surface
Right.
without actually digging.
Right.
So they used SAR data from multiple satellite passes over the Khafre Pyramid and the whole Giza Plateau.
Okay.
And they analyzed it to get a super detailed image of what's underground.
I see.
What's really interesting is that this data shows what looks like spiral-shaped pillars.
Fibropillars.
Yeah, and these rod-like connections inside the pyramid.
Interesting.
It kind of suggests a level of engineering that goes way beyond just, stacking rocks.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's not what you typically picture when you think of the inside of a pyramid.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if these were like functional parts of something.
Yeah, instead of just, support beams or something.
Right.
It definitely opens up some possibilities. Now, it's super important to remember that these findings are based on radar data.
Right. We haven't actually
Yeah.
dug down and seen them with our own eyes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still some interpretation needed.
Right.
But the tomographic images from this data, they show these areas of really intense color above where they think the bone chamber is.
Okay.
And those strong signals, those suggest something artificial is there.
Something artificial.
Yeah, something with a different density than the surrounding rock.
Wow, so the radar's picking up something big in those spots.
That's what it looks like. And here's another thing. While these strong signals and these unusual internal shapes are mentioned in the research, the actual official papers, they don't seem to really dive deep into the specifics.
Like they mention them, but they don't really explain them.
Exactly. And that just adds to the mystery. Why wouldn't researchers explore these strange shapes in more detail if they saw them in the data?
It's like they found something unusual, but didn't bother to zoom in and take a closer look.
Right. Makes you wonder if they're missing something important.
It does.
Yeah.
But the radar didn't just look into the pyramid, right? It saw things way deeper down.
Oh, that's right. The scans show these vertical cylindrical structures way below the main structure.
Below the main structure.
Yeah, like underneath what they call ground zero.
And we're not just talking about one or two weird readings, right?
No, not at all. They found 8 of these things arranged in 2 neat rows running north to south.
Wow.
And get this, they go down 648 meters.
Just 648 meters.
That's crazy deep, way deeper than any natural caves or anything like that in the area.
That's like almost half a mile straight down. These aren't just some little chambers. This is something else entirely.
Exactly. And the tomographic images get even more interesting. They show that these cylindrical structures seem to be hollow like shafts.
Hollow shafts.
Yeah, and the data suggests that there are spiral pathways going down around them.
So like a corkscrew staircase.
Yeah, exactly. Wrapping around a central well. It really paints this picture of a huge and complex network underground.
It sounds less like natural rock formations and more like something that was deliberately designed and built.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the real implications come in. The research suggests that these structures aren't just under the Khafre Pyramid.
They're not.
No, they seem to spread out under the whole Giza Plateau, under the Great Pyramid. Khufu and Menkaure, too. And
Wow.
they go down about 2 kilometers.
2 kilometers.
That's more than a mile underground.
Yeah.
It really makes you rethink what the ancient Egyptians were capable of.
Seriously, that's not just digging a few tunnels. That's a massive project.
Absolutely, it's mind-boggling. And right alongside these scientific findings came a pretty wild claim.
Oh, really?
Yeah, an official press release from something called the Kefren Project.
Japan project.
Yeah, notice the spelling, Kefren. It's a bit different from Khafre.
Interesting.
Anyway, they made a pretty bold statement. They're saying that these radar findings point to a huge underground city.
An underground city.
Yes, one that nobody knew about before.
Yeah.
And they're going even further and saying that it's the mythical Amenti.
Amenti. For those who haven't heard of it, what exactly is that?
It's basically the ancient Egyptian underworld.
The underworld.
Yeah. The realm of the dead where souls went after they died to be judged.
Like the weighing of the heart ceremony before Osiris.
Exactly. So to say that these underground structures could be the actual Amenti is a huge claim.
It is. It's like connecting a physical place to a spiritual realm.
Right, it's a massive leap. The Kefren Project is saying that these structures match the legendary halls of Amenti.
The halls of Amenti.
Yeah, the ones described in all those ancient myths and texts. They're also claiming to have found structures, rooms, and corridors inside the Khafre Pyramid itself.
In addition to this massive network of shafts.
Exactly. And they think those shafts, which go down at least a kilometer under each pyramid,
Wow.
were the entrances to this underground world.
A kilometer deep. That's like 2/3 of a mile straight down.
It is. And if this is all true, then it really raises the question of who could have built something like this.
Right. Because this isn't something the ancient Egyptians, as we understand them, could have easily done.
Exactly. That's the radical part of this. The sheer scale of these underground structures, plus the pyramids themselves, it's almost too much.
It's like saying someone built a car with stone tools, and then you find out it has this huge underground garage the size of a city.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Now, this mention of ancient myths and the god Thoth in the press release,
Yeah.
that sounds like we're moving into less scientific territory.
A little bit. So what about Thoth and these emerald tablets?
Thoth is a key figure in Egyptian mythology.
Okay.
He's the god of wisdom, knowledge, writing magic.
Right.
And the emerald tablets of Thoth are supposed to be these ancient texts filled with wisdom.
Okay, but what do we actually know about them?
Well, the most well-known versions come from a 20th century translation, a guy named Maurice Doriot.
Maurice Doriel.
Yeah, and most historians and archaeologists agree that there's no real proof that these tablets are actual ancient Egyptian artifacts.
So we're not talking about physical tablets that have been like carbon dated or dug up from an ancient site.
Exactly. There's no solid evidence connecting them to ancient Egypt.
Okay.
And the way they're written, it doesn't match real ancient Egyptian writing.
So basically, we should be pretty skeptical about anything that relies solely on these tablets for evidence.
I would say so.
Okay, so according to Doriel's translation, what's in these tablets?
Well, they're supposed to contain secrets about alchemy, the universe, spiritual stuff.
Okay.
They paint Thoth as this ancient, maybe even immortal being from Atlantis.
Atlantis.
Yeah. And they say he brought advanced knowledge to Egypt. And here's the connection to what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
The tablets also talk about the halls of Amenti.
The same halls of Amenti that the Kefren Project is linking to this underground city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the Emerald Tablets, Amenti is this hidden magical realm underground where souls go after death.
Okay.
And Thoth supposedly used these halls to stay young and live for a really long time.
So he used the halls of Amenti for, like, immortality?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that our sources point out, this whole depiction of Amenti,
Yeah.
especially its connection to Thoth's immortality and the idea that it's a real physical place.
Right.
It doesn't match up with what's in actual ancient Egyptian texts.
Oh, so it's more of a modern idea.
Right. It's like taking a familiar name and giving it a whole new story.
Interesting. Now, there are other people who have different ideas about the pyramids and who built them.
Right.
And one name that comes up a lot is Graham Hancock.
Oh, yeah, Graham Hancock. He's famous for questioning the traditional timeline of history
Right.
and for challenging conventional explanations about ancient megalithic sites.
Including the pyramids.
Of course. He says that based on what we know about the technology the ancient Egyptians supposedly had,
Yeah.
He doesn't understand how they could have built the
He
pyramids.
doesn't think they had the tools or the know-how.
Right. And he often suggests that mainstream archaeologists are too quick to dismiss anything that doesn't fit their established narrative.
Like they're trying to protect their version of history.
That's his view.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he brings up some really good points about the Great Pyramid.
Okay, like what?
Well, just the sheer size of it. It's estimated to weigh 6 million tons.
6 million tons.
And it's made up of over 2.5 million blocks of stone.
That's incredible.
It is. And he also points out the mathematical and geometric relationships in its design.
You mean like how the dimensions seem to match the Earth's measurements?
Exactly. The ratio is 1.43200.
Wow, that's incredibly precise.
It is. And Hancock argues that it's too precise to be a coincidence.
So he thinks it was intentional.
Yes. He believes they incorporated these measurements on purpose.
That raises the question of how they even knew those measurements in the first place.
Exactly. It's a huge mystery.
It really make you wonder.
It does. Now, Hancock has a great way of describing the Great Pyramid. He calls it a work of almost but not quite space-age precision.
Almost, but not quite space-age precision.
Yeah, he recognizes how incredibly precise it is, but he also acknowledges that there are some tiny human errors.
So not perfect, but pretty darn close.
Right, and he sees it as the work of master architects at the top of their game.
Makes sense.
He also reminds us that some of those blocks are huge, like 70 tons,
70.
and they were lifted over 300 feet high. The average block weighs 2.5 tons.
That's amazing.
It is. To move those blocks and place them so accurately with the technology they supposedly had is mind-boggling.
It is. It's hard to wrap your head around it.
Hancock uses the analogy of a corkscrew to explain the precision.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, he says that if even the smallest mistake was made at the bottom,
At the base of the pyramid.
yeah, that mistake would get bigger and bigger as the pyramid went up.
Oh, I
And
see.
the whole thing would end up wonky.
Right. But the Great Pyramid is almost perfectly symmetrical.
Exactly.
So how do they do it?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
And Hancock's main argument is that our current understanding of ancient Egyptian technology just can't explain it.
Right. He thinks there's a missing piece of the puzzle.
A lost chapter from the human story.
Exactly. A lost technology. And when we bring this back to those spiral pillars that were found with the radar,
Yeah.
Hancock sees them as a potential link to this lost technology. He
Great.
compares them to solenoids.
Solenoids, yeah. Those are coils that we use in modern technology to create magnetic fields.
Okay.
And those magnetic fields can be used to generate electricity or heat.
I see.
So he's suggesting that maybe those spiral pillars in the pyramid weren't just structural.
They were part of some kind of advanced technology?
Exactly. Like maybe they were used to harness some form of energy.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. It challenges the whole "the pyramids are just tombs" theory.
Now, what about the more traditional explanation for how they move those massive blocks?
You mean the ramps and the wet sand?
Yeah, Hancock addresses that too, right?
He does. He says that while those methods might have worked at ground level,
Yeah.
he doesn't see how they could have lifted those multi-ton blocks to the higher levels of the pyramid.
Like that King's Chamber.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's hundreds of feet up. The logistics of building a ramp that big and sturdy enough to get those blocks up there.
Right. It just doesn't seem feasible.
Not to him. And it's a fair point. I mean, it's one thing to drag a block up a ramp on wet sand at ground level, but doing that millions of times at such heights to achieve that level of precision.
Right. That's a whole different ballgame.
Exactly. So if there was this lost civilization with advanced technology, as Hancock suggests, where did they go?
And what evidence is there?
His theory is that a cataclysmic event wiped them out.
A cataclysm? Like what?
Maybe a comet impact.
It's a comet impact.
Yeah. During the Younger Dryas period, which ended about 12,000 years ago.
12,000 years ago,
Yeah.
that time period keeps popping up.
It does. It's a significant point in history. He thinks this event could have destroyed a civilization that was spread all over the world.
Wow.
And we only have a few traces of them left, like the megalithic structures.
Because those would be the only things to survive.
Exactly.
So he's suggesting that the pyramids are like the ruins of this lost civilization.
That's his idea. He also points to other sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Okay.
That also dates back to around 12,000 years ago.
12,000 years ago again.
Yeah, it's another example of sophisticated construction that seems to appear out of nowhere.
Like it doesn't fit the timeline of human development.
Right. And then there's Plato's story of Atlantis,
Oh, right.
which he says existed around 9600 BC.
Also around 12,000 years ago?
Yeah, and Plato describes its destruction by a flood.
So the idea is that a cataclysm like that could have wiped out almost all the evidence of this civilization?
Exactly. except for the really big stone structures
Right.
and the rapid rise in sea level at the end of the last ice age.
Which also happened around that time.
Exactly. That would have submerged any coastal cities and a lot of potential evidence.
It's a pretty compelling theory. It makes you look at these ancient sites in a whole new way.
It does.
Now, our sources also mention a completely different perspective,
Okay.
a biblical one,
Oh, interesting.
from the Book of Genesis and the Book of Enoch.
Okay.
This might seem like a strange jump, but are there any connections to these ideas of lost civilizations and cataclysms in those texts?
Well, first we have to be careful about trying to match up biblical timelines with scientific dating. It can get complicated, but there are definitely some interesting parallels.
Okay.
The book of Genesis describes a global flood.
Right, Noah's Ark.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a major cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
But the timing in the biblical narrative doesn't line up exactly with the Younger Dryas period.
Right.
But in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, it talks about a time before the flood when the sons of God,
Who are often interpreted as fallen angels?
right, they interacted with human women.
Okay.
And this led to the birth of Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
Yeah, who are described as giants and powerful beings.
Okay.
And our sources point out that the angels' motivation for this was desire.
They wanted to be with the human women.
Right, and they made a pact to do it even though they knew there might be consequences.
That's interesting. So there was a period before the flood where these beings and humans were living together.
Exactly. And that raises questions about what kind of knowledge or technology might have existed back then.
Because if these beings were angels or something similar,
Right.
they might have had advanced knowledge or abilities.
That's one interpretation. And then the flood itself is presented as God's way of cleaning up the world.
Like a reset button.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the world had become corrupt and violent.
Okay, now what about the Book of Enoch?
The book of Enoch goes into a lot more detail about the fallen angels.
Okay.
It describes them taking human wives and teaching humanity all sorts of forbidden knowledge.
Like what kind of knowledge?
How to make weapons, how to make cosmetics, enchantments, even knowledge of plants and root cutting.
That could be interpreted in a lot of different ways.
Exactly. From medicine to maybe even something more magical.
Right.
And the book of Enoch says that the children of these unions were giants.
Giants.
Yeah, huge giants
Okay.
who eventually ate up all the resources and then started eating humans.
Oh, wow. So it's a story of both advancement and destruction.
Exactly. The knowledge they gained from the fallen angels brought both good and bad.
And the source material emphasizes that the angels were also exploiting the earth.
Yes. They were digging into the earth, taking its resources,
And they were mixing with animals.
creating these monstrous creatures.
It paints a very different picture of the ancient world than what we usually think of.
It does. It's a world full of strange and powerful beings.
So what happened to these fallen angels in the end?
According to Enoch, they were judged and punished. They were
How?
bound and thrown into the depths of the earth.
Wow, into the earth.
Yeah. And then the story shifts to Noah and his family.
Right.
God chooses Noah because he's righteous,
Okay.
and he decides to flood the world to get rid of all the wickedness.
And that's the story of Noah's Ark.
Exactly. Noah builds the ark, he and his family and the animals survive the flood, the waters recede, and God makes a covenant with Noah.
Symbolized by the rainbow.
Exactly.
So even though the timelines don't match up perfectly with the scientific theories we talked about earlier,
Right.
there's still this idea of a global cataclysm and a civilization that was very different from ours.
Yes. And maybe even a civilization that interacted with beings that we can't explain with science.
It's a lot to think about, but through it all, the big mystery remains. Who built these incredible structures?
You mean the pyramids and the underground networks?
Yes. Who built them and why?
It's the ultimate question. And it seems like our simple explanation of they were just tombs might not be the whole story.
It might be just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
Hmm.
This information from all these different sources makes us wonder if we need to rethink some of our other assumptions about the past.
Like what?
Well, could all these different threads, even though they come from different places,
Yeah.
could they point to a history that's much more complex than we thought?
A history that's been hidden or forgotten?
Maybe? Something to think about. It's a good reminder to do our own research and question the stories we've been told about our origins.
Exactly. Don't just take things at face value. Dig deeper. Explore the possibilities.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
It is.
And who knows what other secrets are out there just waiting to be uncovered?
I'm sure there are plenty.
I think so too.